Right, UFC 296. In my opinion, prelims delivered better than the main card. I'm going to start off with Leon Edwards and Colby. Colby Covington looked embarrassing in that fight. That was not how Colby's meant to fight. What was his coaches thinking by praising him in the fifth round, saying, right, you're getting takedowns? He needs to tell him, you are rounds down, you need to apply the pressure and look to work the takedowns and try and force a submission, or risk getting knocked out and just try and swing for Leon Edwards' head. But he didn't do that. And it was just a bad, low output, patient, trying to go like toe-to-toe in the pocket with Leon Edwards, where you try and overextend with that right hand and then you get countered by Leon, who's constantly switching stance, not just fighting in southpaw, but going into orthodox and then throwing those kicks to the outside of the thigh. So when you're going to try and shoot, it's going to give you like a dead leg, because if you've done a lot of damage to the outside of that thigh, it's going to be harder to shoot on him. And it wasn't only that, there was no setups for the takedowns. It was a bunch of, let me try and reach down low for the leg and then transition into like a single, into a double. But Leon Edwards is good at grappling. He doesn't get enough credit for it. He can do it, but he never really shows it until this fight here. Like, look at the fights with Kamaru Usman and Colby. They were competitive. You could argue that there should have been a draw with Usman and Covington in the second one. The first fight, Usman looked like he was about to win, but there was back of the head strikes. It was competitive. Leon Edwards, Colby, not competitive at all. And it just shows you how good Leon Edwards is improving, because he's very patient. He had that like 74% striking significant stat where his accuracy is so good. He throws a lot of feints, and it kind of like threw Colby off, because when you're throwing these feints and you're very fast, I almost started doing it myself here, it throws you off. And because Colby's meant to pressure, he's too scared, because if he comes forward, he's scared that Leon Edwards is going to feint and then catch him with like a strike, because we know Leon Edwards, after he feints, he can like throw a kick off the feint. He did it to Usman, knocked him out cold. And Colby in his mind was scared, like talking about, I'm going to take him to the seventh layer of hell. Sorry, I'm joking. That's what he did. And he got took to the fifth round and got schooled. And in the fifth round, when he was on the ground, I don't get what he was doing. He was in half guard. I know he tried to get that arm triangle, but he was just constantly throwing these weak, pillow-fisted punches to the body of Leon, which he could just lie down and just hold a butterfly hook and absorb these punches and not take any damage. And Colby couldn't do anything. He looked lost. And then after the fight, he just made a fool out of himself. It doesn't end there. We know it's a character, but he thought he won that fight. And I know deep down in his brain, when he goes back, he knows in his head he didn't, but he's trying to like portray that character, which is why he's talking like that. And it was the fact that even after the fight, he is going on a thing where he wants to get Wonderboy Thompson, saying how he's been chatting all this rubbish about him. And we know Stephen Thompson does not do that. So I don't know where Colby's got this from. I think he's projecting. Colby's the one trying to call him out deep down. Wonderboy doesn't really care about him. He doesn't even want to fight him. Probably. Because he doesn't like fighting grapplers. But Colby knows that he doesn't probably want to fight a guy like Shavkat, because that's extremely dangerous. Especially on the feet and with the grappling and his age. Like, his cardio is still there. That's not the problem with Colby. But he just looks scared against Leon Edwards, because Colby, he don't cut as much weight as a guy like Leon. And that can benefit his cardio. But at the same time, that is why, when it came to scrambling on the ground, it was easy for Leon Edwards, especially I believe it was in that fourth round, not the fifth round, where he took him down and he just bounced back up to his feet. And that is because he's stronger than Colby, he's much bigger than him, and he has got good grappling transitions, BJJ transitions on the ground. And Colby, all that ground control came from the fifth round, really. And it's kind of embarrassing when you think, Colby only shot for 10 takedowns, he got 2. They both got the same amount of takedowns as each other, but Leon Edwards got more submission attempts. So I just think for Colby right now, the fight he needs to be looking at deep down is not Belal. Belal needs his title shot. He's been waiting too long now. It's unfair to not give him it. So Colby, your options are he could fight Shavkat. I doubt he would want to do that. Or he can fight Belal Muhammad. No, not Belal Muhammad. I just said he can't fight him. He would have to fight realistically, Stephen Thompson's the only like low enough ranked opponent he could fight, because Shavkat, I know he doesn't want to take that fight. I would want to see it, but I don't think he would. So what are we going to do? Just sit there and wait and do nothing for like 2 years again, like Colby likes to do? Or give him a fight with Kamaru Usman again? I'm joking. I don't think any of you would want to see that. But a third fight would be entertaining if that's all that's left for now. But I doubt that will happen. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that fight. Alexandre Pantoja versus Brandon Royval. This fight here, I think it was decent, but the only problem was Brandon Royval's takedown defense is just not that great. I've said before, he can be like a technical brawler, like he can counter strike, but when he counters, he can unload on you in like a brawling type of fashion. But that countering by trying to check hook and throw the knee did not work, because when you lift up that knee, it allows you to be close proximity to Pantoja to then grab onto you like he did and then get the takedown, whether it's from trying to grab the ankle and dumping him down, or whether it's trying to body lock him and take him down by doing that. They were open so many times because he kept trying to throw these knees when they got very close in the pocket and then counter with the hook, a bit like what he did to Matheus Nicolau. So he struggled massively, and it was the headhunting as well. When you headhunt against a guy with his hands down, yes, it can be effective, because if your hands are down, your defense isn't going to be the best. And with Pantoja, he's got another unorthodox type of striking where his hands are down, but the benefit of that is it's harder to read when the punches are coming. But Brandon Royval, he was able to land a few times towards the chin, but we know Alex Pantoja's got an extremely good chin. The only guy to actually knock him down is Davison Figueiredo, and that's it. Brandon Royval has been dropped by guys like Matt Chanel, which is weird to think on paper. Like, as a flyweight, it's very hard to get knocked down alone because you barely weigh anything. The power you're going to carry isn't going to be as significant as other weight classes. But that wasn't even that necessary, because all Pantoja needed is one takedown, and once he got him down, we noticed that Brandon Royval earlier just didn't know what to do. It was like punching him in the head, and when you're on the bottom and you're punching people in the head, you look kind of lost, because that's not how you get up off the ground. Because if you're on top of an opponent and they keep punching you, you can take them punches and just keep like holding on to them or trying to lock up a submission without taking any damage because you're on top of them. The only time I've seen a guy from the bottom do significant damage when a guy's on top of them is a guy like Kevin Holland against Jacare Souza. So Brandon Royval was just being hugged on the ground, and it was the body triangle as well. He has got like a Aljamain Sterling type of body triangle where, remember against Jan when he held that body triangle and Jan just seemed frustrated trying to punch because he couldn't get out? Pantoja's got an extremely tight one as well. Like, we know how good his back-taking ability is. So he was able to do that, and Brandon Royval was doing all the right things, by the way, trying to like shrimp and plant his foot into the ground to then explode and turn inwards. But it was very hard to do. I believe the only round where he actually got that to work was in either round 3 or round 4. And I think it was round 4 where he got on top of him and then he started landing a bunch of ground and pound. But that weren't enough, in my opinion, to win that round, because beforehand he was being grappled for most of the round. So if you finish by doing that when Pantoja's being active, even though he's on his back, I don't think Brandon Royval won the round. So it was one where in the 5th round, realistically, he has to go out and just go for a finish trying to headhunt. He tried to do it. It was actually working. Like, for Pantoja, he actually looked like he was gassing out later on in the fight. And we've seen it a bit before where he can get a little bit tired. But it was Brandon Royval keeping them hands up a bit too high. So even though he's landing on him, if he had dropped his hands down a little bit, not like Bobby Green, it doesn't have to be that low, but a bit lower than where it was, like mid to the lower body, he might have had more time to react to the takedown and then actually defend it. Because remember, Pantoja was tired. He wasn't actually like using all of his strength. He was kind of like just leaning into him, using his body weight, not like trying to like use a lot of energy to take him down. That's where I thought it was a bit like technical from Pantoja, because you saw that he was kind of like controlling the leg but whilst controlling one of the wrists of Pantoja. So if he tried to move with the other hand, he couldn't because his hands were trapped. So he's trying to like circle to the right to get out of that hand being trapped. So as soon as he frees the arm, because he's turning right to get out of that position and create separation, Pantoja's able to follow in with him using his body weight and just glide him down to the ground, not even using a bunch of strength, but using the technique. And that is what he was able to do in the fight. Use the technical side of the game instead of just a bunch of raw power and strength to get the takedowns. So, Brandon Royval, it's unfortunate for him because he wants to win the fight, obviously, but Pantoja is just, again, the most underrated fighter in the UFC. I think he's more rated now, but before he won that belt, he was the most underrated fighter in the UFC. Now we have Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Stephen Thompson. This fight here should have never have happened. Stephen Thompson didn't want the fight to happen, but salty Dana White made the fight happen because he did not fight Michel Pereira, who did not make weight. But as of the rules, he still would have had to fight, and Michel Pereira would have had like a purse cut. But he didn't take it. He went out in the media and said about it, and Dana White did not like it, so he gave him a fight against Shavkat, which he was always going to lose, and he did lose. And Shavkat, this was a good performance by him, as boring as it looked, because you see, first of all, he starts trying to pressure, and Wonderboy's kind of like feinting at him, trying to like make him go backwards. But Shavkat does one feint that Stephen Thompson bites on so much that it creates so much space, and it puts Stephen Thompson near the back of the cage. Remember, he's standing side on, so really you want to be using a lot of lateral movement compared to if you're like shoulder width apart like Shavkat, because with your legs in that stance, going backwards towards the cage is going to put you closer to putting your like back foot right against the cage compared to shoulder width apart, because your feet will be facing in front of your opponent. So if you go backwards, you can take more steps compared to taking that massive plunge with that back leg in the karate stance. So he had to make that one big feint that Thompson bait on completely, and it put him against the cage. And then he was able to come into the pocket to clinch onto him, eat a right hand from Thompson, which I was impressed about because it hit him very hard. And then he was able to just hold him, do the Marab, whatever you want to call it, whether you want to call it that crotch sniffing type of style. He did that. He was able to hold him against it whilst landing. They weren't heavy punches, but they were landing. So obviously he was doing damage, but it was nothing significant, but it was enough to win the round. And then the second round, even more impressive. Yeah, he eats a side kick to the body, but you'll notice with Shavkat, even if he absorbs a shot like this, he's trying to get close to you so you can't have enough space. So him walking Thompson down and shooting on him early, he can then use that leg, which he did, to then drive Wonderboy towards the cage. And I don't even think it was intentional when he got him towards the cage like that. Obviously he wanted to, but it was the fact that Thompson, he put him off balance, which made Thompson go into the cage. Like, I think he was trying to get a takedown from that position, but because Thompson was off balance, runs into the cage, he's able to clinch onto him. And it's not only that, it's the control of Shavkat. He's very good at manipulating your opponent's balance. So you're only able to use that one body part to defend against Shavkat, because you see when he's on the ground, he has like one hook in around the back of the leg of Thompson, whilst using one of his hands to go around the back of Thompson's back and then grab the arm and put it in like a Kimura lock. So that arm's bent in an uncomfortable situation where he can use the other hand to fire off. So at this point, one arm's trapped, one leg's trapped, and, well, no, you could say two arms are trapped, because he would sometimes use the other hand to like transition and then put himself in a better situation. And it was just like he had complete control over him, manhandled him. And Thompson can't do anything but use one leg at this point. Or if he wants to use one hand, he can't really do anything with it but just hold it against his face to prevent getting mauled in the face. So because Shavkat's putting him off balance, he's able to trap that arm and use that to try and get a rear naked choke attempt, which I'm surprised Wonderboy didn't tap out straight away, because it looked deep and you could tell he was grimacing a little bit. And then he's able to make it all the way to, it looks like, in my opinion, kind of like a neck crank. Like, it doesn't look like it's completely on the neck, it looks like it's on the lower thirds of the chin, and on that chin area he's just pulling tight, and Wonderboy's face is planted on the ground, his back flattened almost, and he's able to get the submission win. So it's a good win by Shavkat, a good performance, but it was a stupid fight to make. And now really I want to see him fight a guy like Colby. We can't say Bilal because he has to fight for the title now, so yeah, it's got to be a guy like that. I don't think he'll fight a guy like Kamaru Usman. I don't know what he's doing right now, but yeah, I don't think that will happen. So Colby Shavkat would be a very good fight to watch, but I don't think Colby wants it. Paddy Pimblett versus Tony Ferguson. Unpopular opinion, even though Paddy Pimblett won that fight, he has shown that I don't even think Paddy Pimblett will be top 15 quality. I hope he can be, but after watching that fight, I don't think he can be. I dread to see the day when Paddy Pimblett fights a 5-round fight. He looks so much bigger in that cage than usual. Yeah, he was patient, and he did not leave his chin up in the air like he usually did, but you were fighting Tony Ferguson. You were fighting a 39. Hang on a minute, let me check. I think he might be 40. No, he's not. He's 39 years of age, but he's going to be 40 next year on an 0-6 losing streak. 0-7 now. And to go out there, realistically, Paddy Pimblett needed to get a finish to get a little bit of credit. Yeah, he dominated him in terms of, like, he went out there, he outstruck him, he outgrappled him, and it was a flurry of punches. It was very good, but Tony Ferguson now, he's scared of punches. When in the day did you see Tony Ferguson looking away from punches and kind of like turning his back, trying to run away? You don't see that back in the day. Now you do, because he's old, the brain damage is kicking in. And I'm sorry, Paddy Pimblett, in that 3rd round, it looked poor. Apart from the takedown, because he looked gassed, he was mouth breathing, he almost looked like he was going to lean into the cage. And thank God he got that takedown, because if he didn't and he failed that and ended up like on the bottom, he would have struggled a little bit because he looked completely out of it. So yeah, it was a good performance on paper when you think he was able to out-grapple him like that, but I thought realistically Paddy Pimblett needed to get a finish to get even a little bit of credit, because he lost to Jared Gordon. Well, he should have. And against Tony Ferguson, he won it, you could say comfortably, but there was a few times when some submission attempts almost happened. But Tony Ferguson with his jiu-jitsu, it's very inconsistent at times. And Paddy Pimblett's got very good jiu-jitsu, so it's going to be hard to do it. But he actually beat Julian Rosa to a 5-round decision, which I'm still shocked about to this day. But against Tony Ferguson, his boxing looked sharp at the end of that round, but it was a lot of kicking to the legs of Ferguson. And Ferguson weren't really checking or teeping a lot of them either. So it was a rough night for Tony Ferguson. And Tony Goggins, it didn't matter. He's not going to save him. Like, no matter what Tony Ferguson's trying to do, none of it's going to work. What he's got to do, he's got to fight like prelim fighters now. I think the next fight we might see from Tony Ferguson, if he don't fight in UFC 300, I would not be surprised if we eventually saw Ferguson on the prelims. Look at Cody Garbrandt. I'll talk about him later. He's on the prelims now. Not even main eventing on the prelims. Not featured prelim in it. I think Ferguson, he's at the level where he might have to feature in a prelim. He might. I'd like to see him on a main card, but when you watch him fight now, it's not the same Tony Ferguson. Just getting out grappled and he doesn't know what to do off his back anymore. He throws a bunch of elbows, but he gets held down by like a gassed out Paddy Pimblett. And that's probably due to the size of him being bigger. But I think even a Jim Miller now would not be a good fight for Tony Ferguson to do. I think a good fight for him to take is a guy like Claudio Piellas, where his striking isn't there, but he's got the jiu-jitsu, like a big threat off his back. They're the type of fights he's got to take or retire. I would say to retire. I think he should have retired probably after Nate Diaz. But he just can't get himself to do it. So, Paddy Pimblett, I like him. I wanted him to win the fight. I know a lot of you wouldn't. But it's over for him. But I think he needs to fight a guy like Matt Frivola. That fight there would be a massive test, because you've got a guy who's very good at grappling, even though Benoit Saint-Denis did well in the scrambling, and he can strike and he can knock you out. So that is the fight that we need to see. He called him out before. You've beat Tony Ferguson on your comeback after a long time out of the sport. Have a fight with Matt Frivola. And yeah, that's all I've got to say. Josh Emmett versus Bryce Mitchell. That was brutal. He got put into a seizure by Josh Emmett. That just shows you how much power this guy has. Look at the way how he knocked out Michael Johnson. It's the level change and then the right hand. And because he's actually quite quick when he throws the right hand, it's speed and power combined. And it just put him out completely. And I believe one issue with Bryce Mitchell's game was he was being quite aggressive early, but he wasn't looking for takedowns. He was trying to like strike and be a bit confident in it. But that's not what you want to do. Remember, he took it on short notice, so the worst possible thing to do is strike. You're a grappler, you're on short notice, go in there, be aggressive, but if you're going to be aggressive, go for takedowns. Don't be aggressive and strike, because if you do that, you might end up getting knocked out, and he did. And it weren't only that, it was the pressure, but hesitation as well. And I do like Bryce Mitchell, but the problem is you have to commit when you're going to throw. And the time when he did commit, unfortunately, he got countered quickly. And it's because Bryce Mitchell can be kind of slow when it comes to striking in the pocket at times, because he overthinks. Like, you think he's about to throw when he's in the pocket, but he actually feints and doesn't end up throwing when he's in like a good range to do it. Or even use that like punch to set up a takedown. We weren't seeing that. So I hope he can recover well. Never take short notice fights against Josh Emmett. You shouldn't deep down. And I think he should look at fighting someone much lower down now. Maybe even an Alex Caceres, when he can recover from that, I believe, elbow injury against Giga. Alonzo Menifield versus Dustin Jacoby. This was a weird one because Alonzo Menifield, Hail Mary type of fight for him, where Dustin Jacoby, believe it or not, is controlling the majority of each round, but he gets not overzealous, what's the word, complacent, because he's jabbing away at Menifield. You're actually seeing him pop a 1-2 at some point, making Menifield back up into the cage, but because he's just throwing that jab, Alonzo Menifield, all he was throwing is a counter hook, and he'd bring it wide from his hip, which would make it very telegraphed, so it was easy to see when it was coming. But if it touched you, even though it's over telegraphed, he's generating a lot of power. He hits like a heavyweight. So each time he hit him, he was rocking him each round almost. Well, not the first round, but the second round. And in the third round, when he put him down, and then he's on top of him. And I don't know why Alonzo Menifield did this, where he's hugging him. A bit like Ryan Spann against Anthony Smith, instead of looking for the finish, and he couldn't. And then ends up getting reversed by Jacoby, and he then allows Jacoby to clinch onto him. And there's one thing that Jacoby does, when he gets hurt in a fight, he stops trying to like box. He like tries to clinch onto people. Like when he knows that he needs to get like a finish, he begins to grapple. It's very weird thinking. But in his mind, I think he thinks that he was winning compared to when he fought Azmat. He weren't winning that. He knew he weren't winning that without a finish, but he decided to grapple. Compared to this fight, there was an argument for him winning. Even though he got knocked down in the second round, he was controlling most of the action, but the rules are mainly on damage. And Alonzo Menifield was rocking him, hurting him badly. That's why he was stealing rounds. He weren't like winning them convincingly. He was at the end, after Jacoby gets into his rhythm, he thinks that he's beating him up enough, drops the hands down, bang, sits him down, and then he's lost the round off damage because he's taking too much damage, and then he's not recovering and doing anything massive, so he ends up losing. It's unfortunate. I can see why you're giving it to Jacoby, but in my opinion, unfortunately on damage rules, you have to give it to Menifield. And then we had Irene Aldana versus Karol Rosa. For a WMMA fight, extremely good. Fight of the year for women, because this fight here should not have delivered the way it did. And it all started off Karol Rosa, first round, chopping up the legs of Irene Aldana. And one thing we've seen today is Irene Aldana does not know how to check leg kicks. She just stands there with her boxing heavy stance, heavy on that front leg, absorbing these kicks to the outside and in the inside of the leg. And each time she's landing, after a while, you see kind of Irene Aldana's leg buckle each time she eats a leg kick. But because she's good at pressuring forward with the jab, and then sometimes coming down low to the body, it then opens up the head again. And especially in the third round, when she hurt Karol Rosa with that body shot, she looked so like tired from it. She kind of like grimaced and winced. She kind of like backed up a little bit and just took it like she was winded. So Karol Rosa, that was a good first round. But after a while of getting pressured, she was struggling to get that same type of sting on the leg kick. And I think that was because she was allowing Irene Aldana to pressure too much. And she was only relying on her kicks, really. Yeah, she'd throw a punch with her hands, but there wasn't enough. It was too many like leg kicks to the point where Irene Aldana, even though she's eating the leg kick, she can keep coming forward. So maybe if she moved more like laterally and then tried to kick off an angle, she might have had a better job of like stopping Irene Aldana. And then finally, Cody Garbrandt versus Brian Kelleher. that was like a vintage Cody Garbrandt performance. The only thing I was worried about him at times is he did look a bit static, but I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. It was much better than that last fight he had with Trevin Jones, where he looked scared to not get knocked out and was like fighting on the outside, not really being as aggressive as he usually was, shuffling with his feet, using good footwork, but not like committing with like more than one punch or two punches. This fight, you were seeing him throw like 3-punch combinations, hooks, and we have not seen that for a while because I believe Cody Garbrandt knows about his chin. If he overthrows, he can get countered. He's had times where he will rock the opponent, but because his chin is not good, it still isn't good now, but he can still fight. He's rocked opponents, but then ends up getting dropped by getting over aggressive. Kai Kara France it happened with. That was at flyweight, I believe. And who else was it? Pedro Munoz gets clipped. So he won't become another title challenger in my opinion, and I swear to God, do not put him with Figueiredo. The fight you want to make with Cody Garbrandt to get his career back on track, Chris Gutierrez, that'd be a good fight if you want to break back into the top 15, because a fight against Figueiredo, yes, you've got very good takedown defense, but you've got to remember, Figueiredo hits hard. He was rocking Rob Font, who's a bantamweight. And remember, he weren't a small flyweight either. He could fight easily at bantamweight. He was a big flyweight. So Garbrandt, I would not take that fight if I was him. He should be looking at Chris Gutierrez, where he might cause him a problem with leg kicks, because you'll notice with Brian Kelleher, them leg kicks were hurting him. Like, he grew a muscle on his calf. I'm joking. He like had a bruise or some swollen thing in his leg from one of the kicks by Brian Kelleher, and he weren't really checking them. And you knew it was bad when he started reaching down for the leg. You don't do that. If you're reaching down for the leg and you're not going for like a takedown, you know these leg kicks are doing damage to them, because usually you'd either try and teep check or grab the leg and then ankle pick him down to the ground. But he was just trying to stop him from landing it. And he ended up getting that finish. Takedown defense was on point. And yeah, I think he can get back into the top 15, but I think he'll be like low 15. Can't see him beating people in the top 10. So yeah, that's it. Overall, the card was pretty mid. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you, but the prelims delivered in my opinion. And yeah, thank you for watching. Talk to you soon.